Exactly.
No, come on. That doesn't mean like there's different gods. You know that yourself. You know
How
that,
is your
bro.
position not polytheism? Just telling me it's not doesn't answer the objection.
It's not polytheism means having different gods. That is what it means. And with Allah,
Okay.
clearly stated in the Quran many times that He is
No,
one
that
alone
just
and there's
telling me
no one beside
that
Him.
all that tells me is the position is inconsistent. Doesn't tell me how it's not polytheism. You're saying, well, there's these verses over here that talk about him being one. Yeah, but you got all these other arguments that you just admitted that it's eternal composed parts, and I'm saying that's polytheism. So you telling me that there's another verse over here that says that it's unity doesn't answer the contradiction. I know you believe on the one hand that you've got a purely one deity, but I'm saying that these two things are in tension. So how do you reconcile that is my question. How is it not polytheism in terms of what you say about the 99 plus parts?
Most recently, Avery Austin, also known as God Logic, had a panel discussion in where he invited multiple individuals on to discuss Christian theology and Islamic theology. Two of these individuals that were brought on was Sam Shimon and Jay Dyer. In this video, I would like to interact with a conversation Jay Dyer had with a Muslim by the name of Bob Logic. This conversation was fun, interactive, and a whole lot of energy, and I appreciate the energy because that makes the conversation even more interesting, to say the least. So with that said, let's get into this video and see how Jay Dyer handled this Muslim apologist.
Again, because you keep asking me the same question. All right, polytheism is when we believe. When people believe in multiple gods, and with Islam, even in the Bible, there's only one God alone. Okay. Now, if you're gonna go and say Allah's body parts, that means that's polytheism, or Allah having different names. That's nowhere.
You
That's
told
got
me
nothing to do with
you
polytheism.
said they're eternal entities that are not identical to Allah. So how is that not 99 eternal entities or gods? How's it different?
Okay, you explain to me why you think that's polytheism. Explain it to me, because I've given you answers. Go on.
But you're not answering. You're just stating the position that you
No.
believe in God. No.
Yes.
So do you understand the argument is that you have a contradiction? It's not do you at times say that God is one? I know you believe that, you say that. But you also turn around and say, but he's also got these multiple eternal composed parts. That's the contradiction.
Right. But those parts are part of him.
I know. So again, you're just restating the position.
Yeah.
What Bob Logic is not understanding here is that the very fact that you're saying that obviously in the Islamic context, Allah has parts, you're saying that he is no longer one, right? He is no longer one being. If you're saying that he has parts, you're saying that there are multiple gods. There's multiple parts to this God, right? And so thus that's leading to polytheism. So that creates an inconsistency within the Islamic understanding of God being one or Allah being one. See that's the inconsistency that Bob Logic is not seeing here. It's almost like when the idea of divine simplicity. Divine simplicity argues against the idea that says that God is made up of parts, right? Within the Christian theology, when we're dealing with divine simplicity, we're saying that God is simple. He's not made up of a bunch of different complex of parts or things like that. Thus, he's not made up. He's one being, right? And so that's the whole idea, right? From the Christian perspective, is that God is not made up of parts. He is one being. But within the Islamic category of Allah, it's clear that the Quran is teaching that their God, Allah, is made up of parts, right? He has different parts to him. And so thus eliminating the idea that he is one being. So that's what Jay Dyer is attempting to try to convey to Bob Logic.
That doesn't answer the objection. That's just restating the position.
Because that's the position we have to be able to determine to know
So a
that Allah
contradiction,
is one.
exactly. Yeah, it's a
Okay,
contradictory
you
position.
tell
That's my
me.
point.
You okay now, Jay? You tell me why you think. Yeah, that's polytheism.
Because it's multiple eternal parts or entities that are not identical to the one thing. So
Bro,
you got an eternal multiplicity.
Can you give more details, please? Why you think it's polytheism, please? More.
You've got multiple eternal multiplicity in God and Allah, and it's contradictory to the original claim that it's a pure oneness. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways.
So basically, Allah having parts, yeah, that means that's polytheism.
I mean, just the idea that you think that God has parts itself is absurd. because
Oh, it's
parts
not,
entail
Jay.
composition, which is what the material created world is like. God doesn't have parts, by the way. That doesn't make any sense.
Okay,
But you're
okay.
trying to be consistent with a position that is fundamentally not consistent, is the point.
And that's the thing, right? We're pointing out the inconsistencies, right? Inconsistencies are key. If you can show inconsistencies within a worldview, that clearly shows that the worldview is not true. Because a worldview that's true has consistency all the way throughout, right? And that's what Jay Dyer is digging at, and that's what Christian apologists dig at as well, as when they argue against Islamic worldviews, right? They argue against the idea that that those worldviews are consistent, right? They're saying, they're showing the inconsistencies of the position, and that's important.
Okay, as a Christian, yeah, your God also has got a hand, right? Because it says Jesus will be the
What?
right hand of the
No,
Father.
God
Yeah?
doesn't have a right hand. That's a metaphor for his power.
Is it a metaphor? How do you know it's a metaphor?
Because I have a consistent exegesis of the text as a whole. I don't confess to you that God has multiple eternal parts.
Okay, Jesus as a human being, yeah, you believe he's fully God, fully human.
Look at Sam Shimon's faces, bro. If y'all look at Sam Shimon is just so just, they continue to repeat themselves, right? His stress is noted.
And he's got hands and feet, and yeah, is that polytheism for you guys?
No, that's his human nature. That's not talking about the divine nature, which is simple.
That's his human nature. So, as a human nature, is it part of his Godhead as a God eternally or not?
No, his human nature is not part of his Godhead by definition. A created thing cannot be uncreated.
So, can God be all-knowing at the same time, not all-knowing, or God be all human being at the same time, 100% God and 100% human? Is that possible?
Yeah, sure.
Why? How? Can you, Jay, yeah, can you be all-knowing at the same time, not all-knowing?
Yeah, but Christ is not a human person. This is called Nestorianism. He's a divine person with a human nature. So he possesses both of those things at once. Your argument is premised on somehow there being an impossible contradiction between these two things. We don't think there is a contradiction between. It's a both and, not an either or.
I love the way Jay Dyer explains that, right? Jay Dyer is very good at that. He's a very good explainer of these ideas, and I appreciate that. And good job, Jay. Good job. Good job.
Look, Jay, even if God tried to be not all-knowing, it's impossible to God. Because for you, even you as a human being,
you ignored what I said. So do you think that we think Jesus changed into a created human being, that he's not divine? It's a both and, not either or. He didn't become man in the sense of losing divinity or his divine attributes. He has both at the same time, not an either or.
And this is the flawed understanding of the Islamic position, is that it seems to me that a lot of them don't care to really dive deep into Christian theology. They hear about something from another person, and they hear an argumentation that attempts to try to refute, like, the Trinity, for example, right? Or Jesus' divinity. They hear it, but they don't really dive into the theology to better understand what we're saying. What Jay Dyer just explained is theology 101, right? The difference between the hypostatic union, the union of Jesus having a fully human and fully divine hypostases. So this is common core Christianity, and the very fact that Bob attempted to argue and say, well, isn't he having a human nature parts? That just shows that he has a flawed understanding, should I say, of what the Christian position is concerning these things. And so it'll behoove Bob Logic to go back and really study this stuff before he comes up on these panels to try to argue his points, because it's clear that he don't understand Christianity 101.
This is what I'm telling you. It's impossible to have both, because even if God tried to be not all-knowing, it's impossible for him. It's like you as a human being, Jay, yeah? You are sane, not mentally. You are mentally stable. Yeah. Let me finish.
Again,
sorry, bro.
Only if you thought that he's a human subject would you think that. He's not a human subject. He's a divine subject with a human nature. So the mind that he has that's proper to his human nature is limited. It is finite. The mind that he has proper to his divinity is infinite and not limited. It's a both and. Why?
What Jay just pointed out, though, and what he revealed is that Bob Logic, like most Muslims do, they're presupposing their worldview onto the Christian worldview. So by Bob Logic arguing in this fashion, he's assuming that Jesus is just human, right? And from the Islamic position, that's exactly what Jesus is. Jesus is just a human. And so the Muslim Bob Logic is presupposing his theology onto the Christian theology, and he's thinking that the Christian agrees with Bob Logic that Jesus is just human, and that's not true, right? Just as Jay's Dyer just explained. And so this is another flawed position from a Muslim who clearly doesn't understand Christian theology. And once again, Muslims, if you are out there watching and you see this video, it will be smart of you to go back, read the documentation, read the theology behind what the positions is. So when you come up on these panels, guys like Jay Dyer or Avery or Sam, they're not giving you a theological, systematic theology breakdown of this stuff, right? This is if you care to engage in fair and fruitful conversation, it behooves you to make sure that you do your due diligence so that we can have that kind of conversation. So the conversation is not wasted on giving you lessons of correcting your positions or correcting your ideas of Christian theology. That's a waste of time, right? We want to make sure that the conversations are fruitful.
How can God do that? How do you know God can't do that?
Okay, I mean, if you allow me to.
And by the way, you believe in a God who has parts, by the way, so your position is even more silly than this.
Yeah, but our position is that God, despite having parts, they still remain the same. It doesn't come off him, and God stays exactly the same in terms of his knowledge. He is constantly all-knowing, all-powerful.
Now wait a minute. Well,
Unlike
you're
God.
Salafi
Let
though,
me
so that's not even true. Not that the Salafi
I'm not. How do you know? How do you know I'm a Salafi? I've never told you.
Well, you're talking about body parts.
Well, obviously, in the Quran.
Do you agree with Ibn Taymiyyah? Do you agree with Ibn Taymiyyah?
Now, how do I know Allah's got part? Just because the Quran says that.
Do you agree with Ibn Taymiyyah on this position?
What? I don't know what he says about it. That's the thing.
Well, I mean, he argues for all the stuff you're arguing. I'm just curious because he believes that God also is limited in time and that he has like temporal knowledge. So I'm curious if you thought that too, because it seems like it would go along with the other stuff that you're saying, but maybe you don't. I don't know.
All right, so guys, I'm going to end a video there, but if you're interested in seeing the full conversation between Jay Dyer and Bob Logic, I do encourage you to go to God Logic's, Bob Logic and Jay Dyer. I think I said that right. But anyway, I do encourage you to go over to Avery Austin's page, God Logic Apologetics, and watch the full stream, the full conversation between Jay Dyer and Bob Logic. But overall, I did want to interact with this because I felt that it was a good referencing point, a good argumentation point of showing not only the inconsistencies of the Islamic position as it concerns Allah, but it also shows that Muslims, a lot of Muslims anyway, I'm not going to say all, but a lot of Muslims do not care for fruitful conversation. They're parroting arguments they heard, but as it concerns their understanding of Christian theology and things like that, they don't understand it. And thus we get argumentations and conversations like what Bob Logic just had with Jay Dyer, where Jay Dyer spent most of the conversation correcting their errors as it concerns the understanding of Jesus Christ, hypostatic union, and things like that, right? Once again, Muslims, if you watch this video, take care to study your opponent's positions. Study your opponent's positions so that not only will you gain respect from your opponent, but you also will engage in a fruitful conversation so that time won't be wasted, right? Time won't be wasted. But all in all, I pray that you like this video. And if you do, make sure you subscribe to The Gospel Truth, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any shows that are coming up here in the future. That's it. God bless and take care.